Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to share in this service. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Jamaica in the Anglican Church and attended an all-girls Anglican school that provided a solid, rule-based foundation and operated under a strong ideal of meritocracy and sisterhood. All was well if you followed the rules. My family emigrated to the United States during a tumultuous socio-political time in Jamaican history. Having dreamt of becoming a physician after finishing college, I was gladly accepted into medical school and began a long period of training in medicine internship, residency, fellowships in my specializations. Gratefully, after completing my training, I landed an academic and clinical position at a top medical center in Philadelphia. Worked with patients, taught medical students, residents, and fellows, and conducted some clinical research. The position was fulfilling. The reward I believed for long, hard work, following the path I designed for the best of my ability. After all, I had bargained with God and believed we had an arrangement. If I followed the rules and asked for the things I needed, He would come through for me. For a while, all was well. I worked, got married, had a beautiful daughter, lovely home. Then one afternoon, at the end of a busy day in clinic, walking past the white, sterile pillars along the long hospital corridor towards my office, charts in hand before the electronic medical record, as was customary for me, I began to listen to messages. I recognized my sister-in-law's voice, but could not quite understand what she was saying. I listened again. She was calling from the UK. This time, her words began to congeal into some kind of sense. Charmaine, Mark has died. My husband, Mark, was in London and had been taken to the hospital for a minor issue. He was scheduled to be discharged the following day. Certainly, it could not be true. I wondered if I was dreaming. My world collapsed. We all have different ways of dealing with stress or stress reactions. Mine is to take action. I telephoned my sister-in-law, who confirmed the worst. I called the hospital where he had been staying and asked to speak with a physician to physician, senior physician. He was in clinic, unavailable. Instead, a first-year trainee answered the phone. She seemed overwhelmed, in over her head. I asked about my husband. A pause. Then she responded, "No, he's not dead." My head began spinning. I tried to keep calm. I was relieved, began to think systematically, asking for all the clinical findings. The results were critical, brave. She told me he had been transferred to intensive care unit. I coached her to the care he needed. I asked if she agreed with the suggestions. She understood, confirmed, and at this time I was thinking about my daughter Danielle, my 4-year-old. How would I tell her and what would I tell her? I made arrangements to fly to London with my daughter that evening, trying to keep calm without frightening her. Inside, I was falling apart. Mark had died before we landed. At the hospital, I asked about what transpired between that conversation and his death. None of the agreed-upon plans for his treatment were carried through. Negligence, I knew it, I said it. I no longer trusted other doctors, lost faith in the institution of medicine that I'd striven to belong to for so many years, felt as though the pillars that supported me were gone, became unmoored, could not pray, could only say, "Help me." Though I was falling apart, I knew that Danielle needed me, that somehow I needed to keep it together. We returned to Philadelphia, home, and it began eventually to go back to work, to clinic, on call in the hospital. But I could not enter the intensive care unit, could not come face to face with the patients hospitalized there for the first few months. I felt those face-to-face encounters. I left them to my trainees, who served as a bridge between my patients in the ICU and me, separated from them by a glass door. I no longer felt as if I was leading my team. My trainees had become my partners, my peers who shuttled back and forth between the patients and me, who stayed outside the glass door, poring as I pored over clinical data, making decisions about their care, keeping them at arm's length. Over time, the distance began to recede, and I began to see the eyes of my intensive care patients and could see them look into mine. Now, however, I saw them differently. They were transformed, I was transformed. The experience had transformed the leaders into followers and the trainees, the teachers into trainees. My recovery, however, was not linear. There were ups and downs. I lost weight, could not sleep. I had energy to take care of Daniela and my patients, but not much more, nothing for myself. My friends and colleagues at work formed a strong support group, one that was stronger and more sustaining than I had imagined possible or even recognized until much time later. I took a course in meditation called Mindfulness for Physicians. Meditation became part of my daily practice. I read Kabat-Zinn. It was another tool that I added to my armamentarium, and I continued on my journey to heal. Became a seeker, striving to learn more, to become more spiritual. I began reading the teachings and writings of Thomas Merton, an American monk and contemplative, and deepening my Christian spirituality. Seeking to find and make connections with others and to become more receptive to them, I became interested in Christian mysticism. It was the beginning of a rebirth. For me, contemplative prayer became woven into meditative practice. I began to recognize and acknowledge both my vulnerability and the vulnerability of others. Through that vulnerability, I gained strength. It became for me a more important foundation than the self-assured meritocracy on which I had been raised. My patients taught me and I taught them. Approximately 2 years later, was offered a big opportunity, left Philadelphia, and we moved across the country to a medical center in the middle of a cornfield in Minnesota. And for the next approximate 15 years, Daniel and I lived in the cold, flat, and sometimes strange Midwest. We had to adjust. We were separated from our support system. As an immigrant, I had always believed that America had one uniform culture, but this one was not one I recognized. We continued learning, growing, forming new connections, staying strong, and we became a new family. Now, I've returned to the East Coast, where I spent my early adulthood, where I trained and matured as a physician, built a family, and back in DC, where my daughter was born. I've come full circle. I've come full circle as a public health physician after 20 years of direct patient care as a transplant hepatologist. I found a new mission in my career. I've come full circle spiritually as well. I returned to the Episcopal Anglican Church in which I grew up after experiencing a sense of community and warmth that was extended to me by the church during a very difficult time, another time when my mother became gravely ill and died. I discovered St. Columba serendipitously one day while on a walk through my neighborhood. After reading about its mission of social justice, I stayed to become a member. Ledley's message welcomed me, inviting me to fill out a form, a card, and drop it in the offering. I and we are a church on a mission. I found strength in acknowledging my vulnerabilities and freely expressing gratitude and forgiveness. I recognize myself, my colleagues and friends, in and through their frailties and vulnerabilities. I see myself and them as people, perfectly flawed and imperfectly perfect. I have formed strong and growing partnerships with God, my trainees, my friends and community. My daughter's grown into a remarkable woman with an interest in making a difference to others. And that's good. Thank you for listening.